Hey everyone, Dreki here, and today we're looking at a 3-channel dashcam from Azdome, 1440p forward-facing, and two 1080p channels for the interior and the rear. Let's check it out. While I'm pulling this box open, let's talk about some tech specs. This camera is based on a Novatech processor which does real 1440p plus 1080p plus 1080p. Its sensors are 2 Galaxy Core sensors and 1 Sony Starvis sensor for the interior. It's got a built-in capacitor which is better for heat tolerance, however will not record unless the car is running or if you've installed an additional hardwire kit. Included in the box is the M550 itself, a power cable, the rear camera which is attached to a long cable and is waterproof, sticky GPS mount, an internal camera which separates from the main unit. There's also a couple extra stickers for running cables, and most importantly, a 32GB SD card from Azdome, which should prevent any card incompatibilities or problems that arise from using a low-end or counterfeit card. Of interesting note, this camera doesn't actually have a USB port for data transfer built into it, so the only way to get data off of this camera is to either use the micro SD card with an SD card reader, or to transfer using the app. The camera itself has a large, bright screen on the back and buttons lining along the bottom. It is not a touchscreen, however the user interface is straightforward and easy to set up for anyone who has used a dashcam previously. The only mounting option included is the sticky GPS mount, which only tilts the camera forwards and backwards. There's no side-to-side motion, and the range of motion for forwards to backwards is kind of limited as well. In some vehicles, for example my car, I found the camera was tilted a little bit higher up than I normally would have a dashcam pointed. Speaking of video quality, if forward-facing 1440p video quality is your priority, then this camera does deliver on almost all aspects. Color rendition is good, if just a tiny bit too warm in some cases. There's a decent amount of detail from the 1440p front-facing camera, although sometimes license plates and oncoming traffic do get smudged away, especially at higher speeds, just because the compression rate is pretty high. For technical people, around 15,000 kbit per second. Most notably, there's no stuttering or frame loss, and video looks smooth and pleasant to view. Things like street signs are highly legible, license plates on adjacent cars traveling in the same direction are readable, and overall this video quality fulfills the primary function of a dashcam quite well. Now looking at the interior camera, this is a 1080p resolution Sony Starvis sensor, and it does a very good job at 1080p as well, with lots of detail on everything in the car, and even in some situations where it's pretty bright outside of the car, I can still see what's going on through all the windows around me. You can see that one thing I mentioned earlier in terms of the camera's flexibility while mounting come into play here, because the interior camera, due to the angle of the front camera and the amount of swivel it has on the ball joint, is pointed a little bit more towards the roof than I would like. Thing is, to me, an interior camera's primary function is to prove that the driver was not texting and driving during an incident, and this camera it will more or less do that. However, I wish I could turn it just a little bit more so I could perhaps see more of the steering wheel and my lap, so that I can say, look, no phone on my lap, no phone in my hands. With the camera's flexibility of mounting, I feel that it would be better suited towards an Uber camera rather than strictly filming somebody who just commutes to and from work, as it is more pointed towards the passenger, especially since it needs to be mounted on the right-hand side of the rear view mirror or below the rear view mirror in full visibility. All that being said, again, daytime video quality is very good, to the point where I can even occasionally read license plates in adjacent cars. And that's pretty remarkable. The rear camera itself plugs into the USB port on the side of the main camera body. It's a 1080p camera, same as the interior, but it uses a different imaging sensor that results in slightly lower quality 1080p. In most cases, you'll be able to read the license plates of vehicles immediately behind you. However, if vehicles are to the left or right in adjacent lanes, it becomes harder to read their plates. I also find that the dynamic range of the rear-facing camera is not as great as the forward or interior camera, meaning that in some cases white cars become just a little bit too bright, and black cars become just a little bit too dark. All that being said though, this level of video quality is perfectly acceptable for a camera that's more of a supplement to the main unit than a main unit itself. Audio quality on this camera is good, borderline excellent. Sometimes I find it's a little bit too loud and it peaks with a little bit of buzzing and humming, but you can clearly understand what I'm saying to the camera, and if somebody's standing outside of the car when the windows are rolled down, you'll understand what they are saying as well. This is an audio test from the Azdome M550 Dashcam. I'm currently driving along at about 45 kilometers per hour. This is a little bit slower than an average city speed. Now we have the internal camera, the front camera, and the rear facing camera. Although this cable might be in the way of the internal camera right now. So this is a night test in a fairly dark section of the neighborhood. It doesn't seem to have working street lights. A little bit odd. This gives us a good opportunity to drive slow. You know, I'm actually surprised at how dark this section of the neighborhood is. Seems like every second or third street light is burnt out. At night and low light, when I'm stopped, I can read license plates and street signs. Sometimes things will be a little bit too bright on cars in front of you, it just depends on the brightness of your headlights. However, when I'm moving, things become a little bit blurrier, like the frames are blurred together or something, so it's very difficult to read street signs or license plates in motion. I'd really only expect to get basic info out of this camera at night, such as the car's color, what's around you, and possibly, if you're lucky, the street information nearby. This is in line with more or less every other dashcam that I've tested at this price point. In some cases at night, you can even see things that I didn't necessarily see with my naked eye. For example, this gentleman walking on the sidewalk with his dog, I didn't see him until my car had almost passed him just due to my headlight pattern. But you can see it pretty well on camera about a half second before I did in person. As for the interior camera, well, you can tell what's going on inside the car, and that's the most important part. Faces are definitely blurry, there's a lot of noise, but it doesn't look too bad. You'd be able to tell who the people are at least, and whether or not you're looking at your phone while driving. And those are the two most important things for the interior camera in my opinion. Watch this, it's pretty cool, but you can see the transition from a brightly well-lit area with streetlights to a dark section that has no streetlights, because the camera goes from color, where it's shooting with visible light, to the infrared mode, where it's shooting with the little built-in infrared lights. And as for the rear camera, well, so long as there's a little bit of light, you'll be able to get the color, make, and model of the cars. And if you get into a dark section where there's no headlights from other cars, there's no overhead streetlights, well, you're not really going to pick up much of anything from this camera in that case. Again, this is on point with most other triple channel dashcams. So long as there's any light around, it does a pretty good job picking up details, but you know, if there's no light around, then the camera can't really do anything, so don't expect miracles at night, but you'll be able to tell what's going on in most cases. Finally, let's talk about some other features that this camera offers, notably non-buffered parking mode. The camera basically takes 1 frame per second until it detects a significant motion in the frame. And that's about as basic as parking modes come. This works fine, but do note it does require a separate hardwiring kit, as this camera has no built-in battery. And why doesn't it have a built-in battery? Well, I'm glad you asked. That's because a built-in lithium-ion battery does not work well in hot climates. Instead, this camera has a supercapacitor, which is more reliable in hot and cold weather. So in conclusion, the Azdome M550 3-channel dashcam. Good video quality, a little bit lacking in the flexibility of mounting options, but overall very functional and seems to hold up to hotter weather. My sample of the M550 was provided by Azdome for review. They shipped it to me from their Amazon warehouse, meaning that I got the same stock that anyone who buys this camera would get, not something specifically handpicked for its functionality. Azdome did not have any say in this review content, nor did I give them a preview or approval before uploading this video. My video was produced with about 3 weeks with this camera, and in that time I've given you my honest feedback of how the camera performs. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and as always, if you want to support the channel and see a couple seconds of raw video footage for every camera that I've tested, please check out my Patreon link in the description. See you later. Also hey, a quick note on the end here. Huge shout out to Azdome for properly advertising this camera as a 2K dashcam, unlike other sellers of the same hardware who pretend that it's 4K. Good for you guys.